of sin. My fall flew by winter. I forgive your life. The color of your skin will be changed by the sky, and what the sun kisses, so shall I. And what the sun kisses, so shall I. So shall I. Your flowers arrive, and I'm happy for a while. They bloom, they grow, they die. Color of your skin will be changed by the sky, and what the sun kisses, so shall I. And what the sun kisses, so shall I. So shall I.
Good. Oh, wow. Mike is very good. Almost true. Dennis, you want to try it? It's really easy.
The color of your skin will be changed by the sky. The color of your skin. The color of your skin. The color of your skin will be changed by the sky. And what the sun kisses, so shall I. And what the sun kisses, so shall I. So shall My summer of sin, my fall. decides the right way that kitties like, the wrong way when kitties bite.
When it's time for love.
Kitty decides.
When it's time to eat.
Kitty decides.
When kitty's had enough. Kitty goes to sleep.
Laying in the sun,
Kitty decides.
playing with pink yarn.
Kitty decides.
What's inside those boxes? What's inside a heart?
Kitty decides. Kitty decides. Kitty decides. Kitty
Snow surround the flower, pining for the light. Church bell on the hour, open all night. Burn the torch, singer, throw her in the moat. Half a moon, a finger, tight around her throat. In the night, my baby makes a fist, stillborn in my arms. In the night, she cries but can't resist my charms. Spin you like a dancer, break you like a spine, lick you like a cancer, strip you like a mine. You're the cat and the canary, feathers and the teeth. I'm the bloody in your marry, sword in your sheath. In the night, my baby makes a fist, stillborn in my arms. In the night, she cries but can't resist my charms. If you knew that I was you, you'd kill yourself, but you'd miss me.
All right, folks, welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to Beyond Baroque Literary Arts Center. I'd like to welcome you all to the Wanda Coleman Theater and to this afternoon's Magra Books inaugural reading. My name is Jimmy Vega, and I am the interim executive director of Beyond Baroque. I'd like to start by acknowledging Beyond Baroque's presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tonga peoples. We acknowledge the wrong done to these peoples through settler colonialism, genocidal practices, and the violent disposition of their land. And as an arts organization, we are committed to uplifting indigenous communities, their stories, and cultures. Now, for those who don't know, Beyond Baroque is Los Angeles' oldest literary art institution located here in Venice, California, founded in 1968 by George Drury Smith, first as an experimental literary magazine before reimagining itself and becoming the literary home we know it as today. We are based out of the original Venice City Hall and help support writers and help cultivate new writing through our extensive program of writing workshops, readings, and performances. We offer a number of these workshops online through Zoom, such as our free weekly Monday night fiction workshop and our historic Wednesday night poetry workshop as well. The Monday night fiction is facilitated by Raquel Baker, and currently our Wednesday night poetry workshop is facilitated by Martin Iago. Apart from that, we will be announcing a whole new slate of workshops for the upcoming year. We're doing some interesting collaborations with IWP over at the Iowa's Writers Workshop and the Iowa's International Writing Program. So more on that later this year. But apart from that, as you all know, we host over 100 readings in this theater throughout the year. And this is one of our final ones. So we're very excited to be welcoming Magra and their authors. For more of all of this, please do visit our website at beyondbaroque.org, on our socials at BBLitArts. And finally, I just wanted to mention that we are in the middle of a fundraiser campaign. We're hoping to raise $60,000 by the end of the year. And as many of you know, we, as many other arts organizations throughout the nation, we had our NEA cut by the current administration. So any little bit helps support this space and supports the work that we do. No donation is big enough or small enough for Beyond Baroque. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, and we do have memberships for sale that are annual, and something like a membership does really go a long way with us. So if you are a member, really appreciate you, and if you're not yet, I encourage you to become one today. Big thanks to our staff, especially Eric Alberg in the booth running our light and sound today. And apart from that, I just wanted to welcome Sean Pessin and Paul Evangelisti to the stage, the editors of Magra Books. They're going to help to kick us off this afternoon. So Paul and Sean, welcome.
You're going to begin? I begin. Welcome you all for coming all the way out here today. I'm not going to talk about the traffic, but it was, welcome and thank you for braving the traffic. We're celebrating a new format, and that's why we're doing this event. Magra Books with Sean and I and an Italian designer, printer, etc., started it in 2016. That is, we planned it in 2015. Our first issues came out in 2016, more or less 4 a year. So we did from 2016 to 2025. And we did 29 of these little devils. So 29 chapbooks. All right. This every year it was a different color. This is the first year, 2016. And this is Dennis's book from the first year. He was one of the first four. We've done 3 books of Dennis. This is the 4th, right, Dennis? I think so. Yeah. So we've done 3. This book, the green one, which is 2020, I think. The green one is 17 meditations on time that makes up a section in the book he's going to be reading from today. The final thing I want to say without going on, we've never wanted to do it, but we're forced to do it because I love this format. Chapbook format, and in Europe or in Italy where they were printed, they use the French word plaquette. And for some reason, anyway, I really like the format. And like much in the history of small press, it was all determined by economics, i.e. cost. We started this because we could get them printed for very little, $1.35, $1.40 a copy. This is $1.35 a copy, which I consider reasonable for a book. Anyway, I had one idea when we first started a small press in 1971. My editor said, no, you can't. But I wanted to charge $1 for all the books. So we had to charge $2 anyway. And the thing is about this, it was a format that doesn't exist here in the days when we had offset printing. It's A4 folded in half, and I forgot the inches, but it's 15 by 22 centimeters, or whatever that means. Sean will explain that that's no longer an issue anymore. And so when we decided to move on and abandon this because he couldn't do it anymore, we checked here, it was ridiculous. What was it, $3 or $4 a copy to print it in this country, in this format, which is insane. And the biggest problem was we couldn't get them from Italy here anymore. Because what Sean and I used to do is we'd go to Italy for one reason or another. I would go because I compulsively went there. But we would take an extra carry-on and fill it with books. Dennis did that too, with both or one of the books? At least one, yeah. We would take a carry-on and put 200, we printed 200 of each. And we put 200 copies wrapped up in a carry-on. And then that stopped. With the pandemic, everything kind of ground to a halt. It was hard to get things here and then became impossible. And we said one day, about a year and a half ago, we said, why don't we go do regular books? That's my generation likes the word regular. You know, regular coffee is cream and 1 sugar. That's a regular coffee. Anyway, so that's what we did, and you'll see them. We were able to go to, give or take, 6x9 format with 72 plus pages of a book. And that's where we are, and that's what we're doing today. We're presenting 3 books that are, what I like about it is they're all extremely different. I mean, they couldn't be more different, one from the other. One person is, we assume, no longer with us unless he apotheosizes this afternoon and appears behind us here. He would be probably 97. If we can't find him dying, we don't have actual proof of his death. But he was born in 28, correct? Yeah, that's all we know about him. And then the other person is very young, and they're with us here today. And there's Dennis, who is still alive and certainly born long after 1928. So anyway, you'll see it's a very interesting lineup, I think. So I'm going to turn it over to Sean, and who's a good friend of mine, and also who's become an expert. He's going to do it eventually. He's writing his dissertation, believe it or not, a book, excuse me. He's almost done his dissertation. He's writing a book on the history of small press. So anyway, Sean.
Thank you, Paul. I'll speak very briefly about the format swap. So one of the things that made it increasingly difficult to operate in the plaquette was access to distributors. As it turns out, when you have a flimsy object being shipped all over the world, people are less excited about taking that on to responsibly get it from point A to point B. And yeah, literature is eternal, but the book is not always. So the perfect bound paperback book, being a conventional format, makes it easy to distribute. Now we are distributed worldwide. And
Printed worldwide.
And printed worldwide, as it turns out. So, last week I ordered copies printed in the UK to be shipped to Venice, and that was really exciting. The other Venice, not this one. So, yeah, that's pretty much all there is to say about the format change,
Yeah,
distributors.
And our books here are printed in Kentucky?
Tennessee.
Tennessee, sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they're printed in Laverne.
In Laverne, Tennessee, and our books there are printed in a suburb of Paris.
One of the places that they can be
One of the
printed.
yeah.
Yeah.
So if you buy it in the UK, it's printed in Paris. Or if you buy it in Italy, it's printed in Paris.
Yeah, I know that it is also very strongly traditional to complain about Reagan at a poetry reading, but for the paper sizes in particular, there's a wild history that you should look into about changing the paper format in order to create non-competitive zones with Canada paper production, which is how we have the paper sizes that we have as standard. Worth an afternoon of Googling, I gotta say. And I think on that note, I would love to transition into our readers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So am I right that Bill is our first reader? So Bill Mohr, Professor Emeritus from CSU Long Beach, literary historian, poet extraordinaire, has been translated many, many times. Is going to be reading out of Bruce Boyd's book that Bill has been editing for 20-something years. This is volume 1 of a 2-volume set. Second volume's coming out next year, Bill. And we're really excited that that this is part of our initial offering of paperback books.
Yeah.
So.
And Bill will explain all about the book, and I'm sure he will.
Mm-hmm.
It requires some explanation.
So, Bill, please.
When I arrived in Los Angeles in 1968, I don't think I ever dreamed that I would be editing and presenting a book of poems by a poet who at that point had stopped writing poems in order to begin writing computer code in 1965. Beyond Baroque was founded by George Drury Smith 8 years after Donald Allen's canonical anthology, The New American Poetry, was published by Grove Press. And it's hardly a surprise that several poets who appeared in Allen's anthology eventually read it beyond Baroque, including Edward Dorn, Robert Duncan, Amiri Baraka, and Michael McClure. No doubt, if Jack Spicer and Frank O'Hara had lived another 10 or 20 years, they too would have been invited to read here, or had their reading in Los Angeles sponsored by Beyond Baroque, as was the case with Allen Ginsberg. Not every poet in the New American Poetry went on to considerable literary fame, although the list of those who shaped American poetry last century is truly extraordinary. Among them, I would list Barbara Guest, who is one of Dennis Phillips' favorite poets, John Ashbery, Larry Eigner, Denise Levertov, Lou Welch, Robert Creeley, and Edward Field, who went on to edit A Geography of Poets, the first national anthology to include the work of LA's first poet laureate, Eloise Klein Healy. This genealogical confluence of poets ineluctably invokes several legendary scenes, including the Berkeley Renaissance and Venice West, the latter being the subject of Lawrence Lipton's best-selling book in 1959, The Holy Barbarians. As Bruce Boyd, one of the poets who appeared in a nom de guerre disguise in that book, said in a letter to Donald Allen, however, Venice wasn't entirely a zoo. Boyd, in fact, was far more representative of that scene that has been generally acknowledged. In part, this was because he was not only a member of the Venice West scene, along with Stuart Z. Perkoff, who also appeared in New American Poetry, but was also a member of the Berkeley Renaissance, headed up by Jack Spicer, whose collected letters have just been published by University of Wesleyan Press. Boyd, in fact, was the only poet on the West Coast to be an active member in two very different and divergent scenes of poets. Now, of all the poets I've mentioned so far, Boyd is the only one to have appeared in this canonical anthology, never to have had a standalone collection of poems, not even a 16-page chapbook. Today, we gather to mark the publication of Toward Morning, which features the poems that Boyd published in various magazines, including Evergreen Review, Eugen, The Floating Bear, and Jay, a magazine of poetry. Originally, this volume was meant to gather Boyd's letters to other poets that have survived in various archives along with his poems, but the last-minute discovery of a manuscript of unpublished poems in an archive in Canada, of all places, led to a decision to include the letters in a larger volume that Magra Books will bring out next year. In concluding these introductory remarks, I wish to thank Paul Evangelisti for his emphatic support of this 30-year project. Paul, it should be mentioned, led the way during the early 1970s in being an advocate of poets associated with the Venice West scene. Through Red Hill Press, he published collections by both John Thomas and Stuart Z. Perkoff, which later inspired me to track down Eileen Aronson Ireland and guide her first collections into print. I also want to thank Sean Pessin, without whom this book could not possibly have reached the printer, and Mackenzie Bond, who assisted me in keyboarding an original draft of this collection. Let's start today with Boyd's opening poem in Toward Morning, which is a villanelle. It might surprise people to encounter this form in Boyd's work, but I would remind listeners that Donald Allen's claim that the poets in his anthology were dedicated to, quote, a total rejection of academic verse, unquote, was a statement made more for the purposes of marketing his anthology. In point of fact, one of the first things that poets in Stuart Perkoff's poetry workshop in Venice did was to write a poem in form. So let us begin with the opening poem in Toward Morning. The actual flesh is simple breath without a voice, like snakes that make their season's nest in hollow trees. We shed our skin before its death and live by choice. The words we have to speak can serve as a device to warm us at a distance, but in the closer heat we freeze. The actual flesh is simple breath without a voice. And words to us who wish to live seem too precise. Their itch demands a scratch, but hands that scratch displease. We shed our skins before its death and live by choice. Among the gestures that we have to choose, which are concise as sudden open doors and startled eyes and quickly rigid knees, the actual flesh is simple breath without a voice. The snake that eats its tail lacks right advice. It saves its skin, but finds the flesh it has to nibble, disagrees. We shed our skin before its death and live by choice. To breathe and not to say a word might be to rejoice. The eye sees only shadows made by names until it sees the actual flesh is simple breath without a voice. We shed our skin before its death and live by choice. After midnight, the pumpkin landed upside down. The little light went out behind its eyes. A glass of wine before the sound of mice divided silence from the music, shattered as they scurried scurried to the willows. I am forgetting the words, even for the simplest things. There is no power in words, no power at all to fill a glass of water and come at night to pour the moon across your hands. Boyd moved here into Venice in 1953 after getting a BA degree in philosophy from UC Berkeley. And he met Stuart Z. Perkoff on the beach one night and started becoming a founding member of the Venice West scene. And this is one of those poems from that early period. This is how the wind sings lover on the beach. Beloved, I could never be the sky, but I could be the weather. On top of the waves, on top of the water, lover, come dance with me and draw me, lover, together. And the eyes of all the other dancers follow us, and the arms of all the other swimmers swim to us. This is a poem that appeared in the Donald Allen anthology. It's called Sanctuary. Because the warm honey is never dissolved by water, but drifts on the river's stone bottom like wads of raw silk. Under the surface, the swimmers still look, where sharp little stars bloom on the bone tree, and tender, incredulous fish swim out of its watery eyes and grow warmer while gently the bone tree is turned in its bed, and see how it gradually wakens. Around it the water is still, but the sheet glass surface is quietly shaken and breaks into ripples as gulls rise into the room of the hungry children to watch the tall water close over their heads. This book consists of several such short poems and then several long poems, one of which is called Sunflower Sutra and is nothing like anything Ginsberg wrote, and another poem, the title poem, Toward Morning. Both of these are very long, ambitious poems and obviously are beyond the scope of this reading. But I believe both poems deserve some serious attention from readers. Because, of course, I'm sharing this afternoon with others, I would simply like to close with a poem that also appeared in New American Poetry, and that is somewhat, in a way, a direct connection with where we are gathered today. Boyd, in 1958, decides to return to San Francisco and rejoin the Spicer Group, and he lives there for 2 years. And then returns in the early 60s to Venice. While he was in San Francisco, he wrote this poem, one of the first poems, and it's called Venice Recalled, and this appears in the anthology. What's interesting about this poem is that he compares two scenes, right? Northern California and Southern California, and maybe to many people's surprise, in his estimate, he found the Southern California scene more congenial as a community. So this is a poem called Venice Recalled. On the saltwater streets that rose and then fell with the ocean, when the fish that were caught in the mud underneath the wooden footbridges started in to stink, soon there was always the incoming tide. There we were, each his own man, to speak the play of sounds, pleasant or otherwise, but only open and discursive. Differently here, at the language, the oblique sense of a word to stamp one as in, whose dialect, not dialectic, held right or wrong, invents a greater crime than just to force the song, to force it back, and closes them wet and huddled together. They are fearful in their heads of being on the outside looking in to the center of language. But we who would live openly are its natural peripheries, and take the unborn when the dead leave it to grow at our hand. Always to prefer the common, thus the noble Heraclitus, in this world, which is the same for all. Our language is, although induction, the topology of what we live, thus not its substitute, but its enlargement. There, Venice, there with us, a new poem was something, the making, something that asked to be shared at once, seldom a result to praise or blame, and never this only. We mostly looked behind it for the ways that came together, between whom, intended, a clearing was being made, in which to discover when, having forgotten, is recovered, in measure, apart from direction, as in accord with old codes, codices, a kind of love of least action in language, or taken as return to the origin, a place of actual welcome. Always the nearest stone path that is stone path that is watered against the coming of guest is to say cooler. And the poem, what it means to say, for the natural motion of its body, is the clearer that remarks the wider movement of its actual thought. Bruce Boyd, a legend within a legend. Thank you very much for listening to his poetry on behalf of a man who cared about the poem more than anything else. Thank you.
All right, so next up is Dennis Phillips, Art Center professor, poet extraordinaire, translator, former director of Beyond Baroque, and a zillion other credits and things for which he must be held accountable. And so he'll be reading from the Cartographer's Lament. So please.
It's bright out there, out where you are. Thanks to Beyond Baroque, to Paul and Sean, to River Jukes Hudson, who's sitting right there, who made this beautiful book. It's worth buying just because it's so beautiful. You don't even need to read it. You should own it as an object. Is this voice coming across? Okay, good. Because in the initial run of the Magra chapbooks, Paul very graciously did a section of this book called 17 Meditations on Time. I thought I would read that to you. And just to say a couple quick things about the book itself. It's made up of 9 sections, and there are elements from each section that rebound and repeat or are varied in the repetition throughout all 9 sections. So very much the piece is playing with that musical idea of repeating motifs. Hard to hear in one piece, but life is short. Also to say that many of the pieces have footnotes. 17 Meditations doesn't have that many, but if there is a footnote, I'll read it without telling you what the note is for, because that's always kind of questionable anyway. And the way that I've come to think of the footnotes is as a kind of chorus, and so it's a kind of different kind of voicing. And were one to read the whole book, one would realize that some of the footnotes are actually poems, whole sections that appear inside other sections. So there's that kind of, I hope, reverberating structure going on. "17 Meditations on Time." Preface. Tiny bird pecking high above. Behind, a flying insect strikes a window. A black ant crawls on a white vinyl chair, adjacent. Circumjacent, oak leaf and acorn occasionally fall. The red-capped bird is black and gray and white. Others join, and then the pecking stops. Spanish moss hangs from oak boughs. The air is still. Earlier, a large doe lay in a circle of sunlight. A breeze commences. Insects vanish. The deer is gone. Boughs and mosses sway. A chime sounds, and because I'm using language, I know that I'm awake. 1. Sudden early light as a year ago, light that erases margins, now as then. The chariot and its passengers jetted or winged, the golden light or argent, things gained or lost or never possessed. There's also that walking shadow, perhaps aging gum inside the eye. For sure nothing magic unless by magic we understand the workings of metaphor. In that case, the chariot casts an umbra, and if that be true, then right now the penumbra is a golden thing, annular as a year ago. The footnote is, hot autumn morning. This may be my birthday, but the fish need to eat. And I, caught between wonder and irony, clear the gutters, do what needs to be done, frustrated at the trivia of trivial things, bewildered at their gravity. 2. Wind clicks 2 points north and the sun slides south. The force of another tongue, its imprint or of image and syntax, slides too on a different scale. Things fall away. One pictures oceans in the arc of transpolar travel where distance is rendered as interval. Time the trickiest scale, its elements not what they seem. Because one thing models another, it's not metaphor, it's mirror. A mirror up to nature, as a certain young man once said, himself a model or metaphor or mirror. Cloud congeals in dark, clear air. Things fall away. But first, a grayscale cap of clouds erases a ridgetop, and beside it funnels filtered light, so another ridgeline, crenellated with silhouettes of trees, is clear and flat, and for some unknown reason, sublime. There are 2 footnotes with that. I'll just read them without anything else. First, picking out common threads and braiding them is a rope maker's art. The blue smoke of hemp, taut shrouds looped around a loggerhead expressing a last bead of moisture, the strain and friction of a captured thing, smoky incense rising. And the other. For a while the room's aromatic and soon enough smoke, like dust, settles on the generalized surface of things. 3. And if you find that the birds too high in the current are shadows on your retina, or the distant sirens, mechanical or divine, just the ringing in your ears. Footnote. Which conjures so many illusions, and why not subscribe? What's not a retinal or walking shadow? Fog beshrouded morning cannot blanket bird song, siren song, ear song. 4. I know you're listening and doubt it, and who you are and why I'd address you if I knew. You're more than landscape and weather, and not unlike virtue, hope, or gravity. Certain words effloresce in images too, certain lines more like tides, flooding and receding, but you're more than a debris line. You may not be the one filled me with wonder. You may not be the one to share it with me, but you are the one I come to the porch of a hidden cottage beyond which I know I'm not allowed. For sure, you're the other half of this, the necessary catalyst to complete the contract. 5. Old Father, mid-water column, hovering in blue abyss, a permanent version of the transitory, waving up from below, suspended. The footnote. A current, not an arc, a measure, a gauge, a shepherd of the actual. 6. After Crosson. It starts with a little Shakespeare quote. Wells yet the cool and temperate currents outlast the sun's track, and peace rests in the fold of an unsewn sheet, and all ideas fly free like birds from a Buddha's mouth, especially the dogs. And the footnote, inside joke, and the footnote, everyone seems old, especially the view, especially the ocean. Don't blame me for the syllables I count or the music I scavenge. 7. Weaving and reweaving from a storeroom of thread. Spin, measure, cut. 8. You go to sleep. You awaken. Before you verbs and Russians, array as colors on a wheel. Gulls cry far above. You know you're awake, and memory is the anchor. Still, a shotgun in the closet, pamphlets in a drawer, debt and purpose, blood on fingertips, proof that neither color nor sound recollect exactly why the lover turns on the beloved. 9. And Odysseus back in his palace, the trap set and the goddess beside him, Pasadena summer hotter than ever, the very idea of time baked and fleeting. The trap set and the goddess presiding, or choose the fantasy that comforts, the immutable idea of time running ahead as missives from the east add to the jeopardy. Or take comforts and fantasies as they come, Pasadena summer hotter but predictable, as missives from the east hold promise, and yet Odysseus returns once more to his palace. 10. Tides pull in and out. Books are made of leaves. Cataloging leaves are biologists and librarians. Bar graphs also track, record record, and predict the tides. Here the reflection becomes strained by and with and through time. Dust collects despite us. Air sustains more than we can see. Hence, Mount Tambora, April 10th, 1815, explodes. Biggest ever recorded, spread dust 3 years around the globe, brought blizzards to summer, caused Mary Shelley to write her book, some say, others that vampires appeared. Leaves also cover ground. Imagine a stratum of dead leaves circling the troposphere. Imagine a stratum of books there. 11, 3-part invention. The poet walks out to his night office. Odysseus back in place. Achilles before the gates of his city. Stephen bereft of his tower. Lizzie acknowledged universally, "There is no time." In dark windows, the poet older, the world still young, and three young women lithe and casual, at work on their project, frozen in memory. Index and clock, the poet. Spin, measure, cut. The poet arrives, phonemes afire, can't tell the difference between repetition and process. Once the daughter across the table on the floor, now the daughter makes the table. The poet steps onto the porch, the sun not yet risen, the sky orange then gold. Who voices the steps? We, not he, ask. And notes scrapped and loose flurry around the headwaters of nothing more than this. 12. They say that ontogeny recapitulates phylogenies no longer valid. What can it mean that, like Freud, it keeps a literary value? And so the old woman who defenestrates her granddaughter's doll and appears in the granddaughter's dream has a malevolent and benevolent face, becomes a fiber in the paper of a map. And who off to the desert now? Rolling tape of road, mountains clear in the distance. And a motel room and the smell of leaking stove. Boulders aggregated to foothills, the sky black but warm. Like air, like gold to airy thinness beat. What her skin will feel, her eyes see. The cartographer takes a place at the rail. Early summer doldrums. Looking up at a vortex of dark and rainless clouds. Sweating in crepuscular heat. The cartographer charts the moment as chicken singes on a grill, and the moment's elements stand as units to be arranged or omitted. 15. This is the part where the tent seems too small, and the illusion that seemed a lover expands, fills the space, becomes a force too great to overcome. You might be Anchises, tricked by the gods into love, or poor Peleus, also fooled. Or you may have no provenance at all, simply a juggler, ignorant of physics, spinning so many plates on so many sticks. This is the part where you let the plates crash, where you stop jacking the sticks. You might be surprised. The plates might just stay balanced. You might discover it has nothing to do with you. 16. Finger the seam, stroke the fold. Ants, mandibles cargoed, line the atom trail. Ants invented the atom trail. Pigs scream in the background. Crows sail among hemlock. Camped in the trees and observing the glade, we can't predict how the folds will open or the seams hold. 17. The cartographer makes the map once more. The scale is different every time. Land masses shift, rivers and mountains arise or erase. The work is never complete. The charts are never quite right. In the end, says the cartographer, even taken together, the whole will be incomplete. That is my vocation. Thanks.
From Shreveport, Louisiana, from Chicago, Illinois, from an air mattress in my living room in Northridge, California, comes Jessie McCarty, celebrating the publication of Pretty Punk's Poems, Portrait, and Play. This multi-genre work has illustrations in it by Emma Wolgast, which will be hard to communicate in the form of a reading, except if you perform that reading by buying a copy of this book, available in the bookstore, so, as is Cartographer's Lament and Toward Morning, and also some David Lloyd books. Shout out to David. So please, Jessie, if you would not mind joining the mic to share from this book.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Sean and Paul, for publishing this book, and Beyond Baroque for having us here. Yeah, this is my first full length. I'm very excited. It's a lot of Yeats references, if you're into that. Yes. So I will be reading from the poetry portion of this book. And if you want to read the folklore section or the play section, you can buy it in the gift shop. How They Wanted Isles in the Water. How I loved you, with you I would go. How I needled you and refurbished you like a barbed wire rusted, like an ocean fitting into one bottle. Like a shy one with you I would go. Write more, kiss longer. When men tell me I need more texture, do they mean I lack a certain appeal? You want me when I haven't got anything else. You have me when I don't ask. Reach higher, grope better. You, shy one, coalescing, lighting candles in a damp place. You, shy one, let it drown me. To carry pearls in a row, sowing mounds of sand for love. And if it was a wave, let it drown me. There are also a few sections in this book that are in Irish, and I'll be reading that section now. Ella gajo le tu well fair, mogra gajo kahid me ve ime, anta uig mar, banish no carrig, kahid mio ve ime, anta uig. Another forever. Beside you is a man, my love forever. Like a wedding or a rock, I must have gone, there is a grave. Yeats's coat. Yeats's coat, in which he made by the mythology of heel, throat, slog, and soot, wrapped up in song where they sang it, and left its threads ragged and wet. No one's going to wear it now, he writes, for there's more to prison than nakedness, more to dying than dying lying down. Plus, you've got to love the world as cold as it is. Feya ina einer, which translates to left alone. Therapist said you're going to want to need it. Treatments for hip pain included floor stretches, saltwater rinses, begging for forgiveness, silence. My chest stays down in a fetal pose with a furrowed chin. My face stays down on a scraped apartment floor. My teeth stay down, chipping on surly wood panels, drool sliding across bedpost. It is in these isolated moments of help I ask him to love me in all my inconveniences. Spilt milk. Every friendship has ruined me. We have done what we thought was an adequate performance in leisure. We have thought and done more than thinking. Soon we will ramble into nothing, thin out. The pity of love. A pity beyond all threatens the head that I love. Does it matter if I considered a yoga mat for the folk show? Does it matter whether those bodies inside such a grave were ours? I'm filthy. This is what counts. You meet me at the corner of California and Division. Where do we go? We walk endlessly nowhere. We go out searching for shovels. You linger, you're tired, you sit. I graze down towards my hands, closed. Should you be carried? To carry you under rocks, built for you, working harder, for you without greed, is an act of remembering. We reach the crux of location. Dirt is my sound, every stretch is the soil, is a bow to your stage. Love letter, midnight changes. You are still tired. I am still digging. Kisses are left to unburied devotion, where it matters, whether the music is playing or not. The concert is over, and the walk it takes from stage to bed is unjustly long. The grass grows louder, the sun sinks lower. We dig and pray, we dig and pray. Does it matter? I just get your memory, and I just get to be there, and I just get to live here, bent over and bowed. Ephemera. The woods were around us both, and the yellow leaves, fallen like faint meteors, in the gloom past Benton Road stood still, as it always does, on holiday, in ways so trivial. My mother once again abandoned herself in the front seat. Her anxiety. Onward to the fluorescent flooded archive. I fast myself into some lesser thing and my heart breaks. Transit halts for passengers, but never once does it stop for me. I abandon library pastures by starving for literary success. Being trans-southern at Rosella's wine bar. Is fair me agit agus, mo gratu. Man and I. Do I stunt? No, king. Bad bangs, needle prick, impress him, embark him, change him. I'm different now, not yet. Two kings. On Saturday, I pretend to be William B. Yeats. Google, who are the greatest lovers of all time? You as you love you, me as I love us, in a mouth, crown of feathers on this plane to New Orleans. Gertrude Stein's poem Cézanne, today is every day. Shapes of my hand vanish, dissolving into glory. I kiss you, my pigeon is you, all my own. Our hands formed into another mouth. Pleasure itself brings no weariness. Pink. Pink appears again, dream. Pink as it was in proper hues of orange-shaded indigo. Pink in my mouth, sweeping, plate cracks with tongue. Pink as I bite on ceramic, further fuel to my cavity ailments and worn-down gums. Pink is a direct result of rusting. I'm gnawing on material like candy. His dream. To try or not to, he dreams of his mother. By the bed of malaise do I awaken you? He has such a beauty of death on his lips, his face bubbling to the brim of grace, he who used to need me back. Queen Maeve. She goes to bed in everyone's bed, transforms into a real bitch in her sleep. On television, no one can live up to her proportions. No one to watch her breathe, no one to catch her fall. No one to follow us both to that small place in the fool's heart of beauty. Gone now from nights of straight bodies, kissing her body, my body, mixed with their bodies. I go to bed too, in hopes her body becomes something else to me. Gratitude hour. I am and I have it. For every which way, something comes our way. I am, also more so, we are so happy to see you. It's us together. I'm grateful at large, and to laugh, so largely so. Also, for a lackluster catch, my bed springs. Come swish around. Come swish around, my pretty punk, and keep me dancing still, while war rages through the sill of bed fire. Pretty punk, move against the night in your undergarment, lavish with silks, soaked in whiskey with decorative lace accents, worn for the boy at home, waiting to be licked, loved, and memorialized. Thank you.
Thank you again. Thank you for coming. And wondering if you had any questions for any of these three poets. I've got about 100 questions. I always do for Bill. Every time I call him up, I ask him another question about this mysterious figure. To mention, Bill didn't read any of the letters from Boyd. And we have them, we have them presently from Boyd to three people, correct? Yes. Would you talk about that?
So when I say that Boyd didn't have a book out, he was the only one in New American Poetry, I need to emphasize how connected he was with especially the West Coast scene. He corresponded with Gary Snyder, right? So you'd think that in and itself would sort of give you a certain cachet, right? He corresponded with Jack Spicer, whose collected letters have just been published by University of Wesleyan. None of Spicer's letters to Boyd survive, however. When he went off after 1965, all this seems to be lost. But who knows? Maybe there's a box somewhere in some garage, right, with all these letters just waiting to be discovered. He corresponded with Robin Blazer, and he corresponded quite considerably with Donald Allen. To give you an idea of Allen's respect, at one point, Allen is writing, you can find this in the archive at UCSD, Donald Allen is writing a letter to Robin Blazer. He quotes an entire paragraph. Now remember, this isn't a computer where it's easy to type, right? He actually sits there and types out an entire paragraph that Boyd has written him in a letter to Blazer. You know, that he says, listen, Robin, you've got it. Boyd has nailed this description right here. And so he quotes one of Boyd's letters. In fact, I've taken a pretty good look at Donald Allen's correspondence. Nowhere does he type a paragraph from another poet in a letter to another poet. I mean, that's how close how much he respected Boyd. So the correspondence with Allen, with Gary Snyder, with Robin Blazer, and Jack Spicer, I think all forms a kind of constellation that when we finally when everybody can read it, will really add to our understanding of what was going on in the West Coast in the 50s and early 60s.
And that'll be in the next book.
And all this correspondence will be in the next volume, along with the poems that were unpublished that are in, I finally discovered them just like 2 months ago. There's a whole cache of poems that he sent as a manuscript to Robin Blazer when Blazer had moved from the Bay Area up to Canada, along with George Stanley from the Berkeley Renaissance. So in this archive at at Simon Fraser University in Canada, there is a whole wad of unpublished poems by Boyd. What's interesting about this, by the way, if you wanted to hear Boyd read the poems, you can go online. He gave a reading with Perkoff and with Saul White at San Francisco State University in March of 1958. And in that reading, which was taped, which went on for about 45 minutes, you hear several poems that are not in this collection because, in fact, they never were published. But there are copies. The only place they seem to exist is a printed text so you can see the line breaks and everything is up at Blazer's archive inside Simon Fraser. So it has taken a considerable amount of time to track all this down, but it's, as far as I'm concerned, well worth the effort. So that gives you a little more, I think, background on Boyd.
Yeah, And this is going to be next year,
Yes,
okay?
right.
In a longer volume, I forgot, what are you guys gonna call it?
That's a good, what to call it. What's interesting is, for instance, how did I decide to call this Toward Morning? Well, he was published, you heard me mention Evergreen Review, Eugen, Floating Bear. Mind you, of course, these are magazines that anybody who was in the underground in the 50s would have just about given their, left hand to appear in. These were really the coolest of the cool little magazines at that point. And in Floating Bear, Diane de Prima has a note. This is around 1961, 62.
The two editors were
Yeah, yes, along
Diane
with
de Prima
and
and then Leroy Jones.
Leroy Jones. And so de Prima writes, these poems, referring to the poems by Boyd that are published in that issue of the Floating Bear, are from a manuscript entitled Toward Morning, some apotropia instead of an alba, by Bruce Boyd, who doesn't answer any letters that are sent to him. So already by the early 60s, he was beginning to sort of draw in and not respond. I once met with Donald Allen in hopes of securing an interview with him about trying to get some more background on a rather mysterious figure himself. And I asked about Boyd. He said that he had lost all contact with him. In fact, that the royalty checks that he would send Boyd for the continued sales of New American Poetry, those letters with the royalty checks were returned as undeliverable. And he just went, well, I guess that's it. So he literally kind of disappeared, and it took me a very long time to sort of find out what direction he did go in.
And we have no death date.
Now, Brian Kim Steffens at UCLA claims that he died in 2006 and that he was living in North Hollywood. I actually went to a phone book when I was, in fact, staying with my then girlfriend, but now wife, of course, of 20 years, Linda Fry, in Glendale. And I thought, well, maybe, who knows, maybe Boyd's still alive. So I went to the phone book and I did find a Bruce Boyd. And I called and no, I'm a plumber. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Sorry to bother you. So, though, if you want to hear a real irony, in Gary Snyder's archives at UC Davis, there are letters. There's a Bruce Boyd file. And there are letters from the 1970s in it. Oh, really? It turns out that Gary Snyder knew two different people named Bruce Boyd. And one is a landscape architect. And those letters are all buried together in the first folder. So when I first encountered them, I thought, oh, I know what happened to Boyd now. He became a landscape architect. But in fact, there were two, he just happened by chance to know two Bruce Boyds. That Bruce Boyd, who was the architect, in fact, is the one who constructed the design for the house that Lou Welch was intending to build on Gary Snyder's property, but which of course never came to fruition because unfortunately, Lou Welch decided to walk off into the mountains and not come back. So that Bruce Boyd does play a role in West Coast poetry too. Yeah. He lived over here on Carroll Canal and in fact, after he moved back from San Francisco, he ended up at the same place. He was really thrilled by it. And at one point he wrote Gary Snyder and said, I have a job in working in a warehouse that distributes drugs. This from a man who wrote about taking peyote, right? So, he said, but of course he had to be very careful. He was completely honest. Needless to say, they watched everybody there like a hawk. So anyway, thanks so much for being here. And
Any other questions of any of the readers?
I have a question while we're wrestling with questions. So we heard a little bit from Bill about the sort of changing of self while encountering the work as it's also changing, right? That there's two different kind of beings in the universe that you're tracking down while you yourself are progressing through time. And Dennis, right, the Cartographer's Lament is in the middle of a long series of works, right? So you over time changing, the book changing over time, and Jessie, your book, right, in the process of reading it is like undergoing a metamorphosis. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, like the relationship between you changing and the work changing.
Yeah, so for Pretty Punks, it is in 3 different genres. And so it is like physically changing genres, throughout the text. But it's also chronicling, like written in response to like gender transition as well. So that was really fun to kind of process that, especially in the poetry part. And in the folk story, there's a bit of a reprieve. In the sense of more like work and labor transition, like thinking about where does one career go and within like dreams and aspirations. And then the play is transforming between like life and death. Yeah. Dennis, you got it.
Okay, I'm not going to give you a lecture on metamorphosis. Tempted though I am, yeah. But this is, this is Epicurus, that everything changes constantly. And so it's fascinating being older and having a bit of a body of work and understanding how that has changed over time. It's also interesting within the construction of a book what one realizes as one is putting it together, in the same way that in a book that anyone has studied over some period of time, that very text continues to change, even though you would think that it was fixed in time. So everything changes, and for example, in that section I read you about meditations on time, I mean, that is, to paraphrase some stuff that goes on in Dante's Inferno, that time is the thief of life. So anyway, that's, thanks. Your class is now dismissed.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You first began publishing books back in the very early 1950s. What
No, 77. I'm not that old.
early on? Early
I mean, I feel that old, but.
What keeps you at it?
Oh,
after over half a
okay.
century?
When I was telling Dennis the other day, I was telling David yesterday, it's this perverse streak in me that I get a bigger kick of publishing other people's work than publishing my own. And for some crazy reason, and the book that's for sale out there called Traveling is my 40th book of poetry. And publishing these 3 books, Jessie's, Dennis's, and Bill's, we call it Bill's book. It really is, it's Bill's book. Anyway, gives me such a bigger thrill. My partner in crime, John McBride, we started Red Hill Press in 1970, and our first book was 70 by Peter Clothier, who is still with us. He's 88, I think, 89, because he's on Facebook all the time. And we said, somebody asked us that like in the 70s, and we facetiously said, we published because we wanted something to read. But that wasn't too far from the case. I guess, you write the poetry you think you'd like to hear, and at the same time, I like to go a step further and publish the poetry I'd like to hear. I don't know if that probably doesn't answer the question at all, but
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, you're welcome. I was going to say the great translation of Heraclitus by Ezra Pound in his Hugh Selwyn Moberly. All things are changing, sage Heraclitus said, but a tawdry cheapness shall outlive our days. Anyway, thanks all for coming, and books are for sale out there, and I hope you have a look. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.